Om Namo Narayanaye. Om Namo Narayanaye.
Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with Hari Bhakti Vilasa. We're in the 11th Vilasa, and we're talking about the glories of devotional service, or sometimes pure devotional service. And we came up to verse 602. So let's look at verse 603. Verse 603, devotional service is the ultimate goal of life. So in the third canto, 29th chapter, 13th verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Kapila says, pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation, salokya, sausti, samipya, sarupya, or ekatva, even though it may be offered by the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's very interesting here. You can look and you can see 5 types of liberation are mentioned here. Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya. Salokya means being on the same planet or in the same place. Sarshti, same opulences. Samipya means being close to the Lord, in proximity. Sarupya, having the same form like the Lord with 4 hands or whatever form you subscribe to as being there in Vaikuntha or Goloka. And ekatva is saying oneness. It's talking about oneness. Now it's interesting. There's another word that's sometimes used that also begins with an S, sayujya. And sayujya seems to be similar to samipya. It means closeness or close servitorship of the Lord. Whereas ekatva tends to be about kaivalya or oneness, or kaivalya actually means isolation, the isolation of the soul. So it's strange. There's a few slightly different understandings of this idea of impersonal liberation. One idea is that the soul is kaivalya, meaning isolated from God or isolated from others, and just enjoys the bliss of itself. Now, according to many forms of Vaishnavism, the Lord pervades the soul. He pervades everything. So there's a question in philosophy as to whether the soul is monadic in the sense that it can't be pervaded from inside. And some groups of Vaishnavas believe that the soul is pervaded from the outside only, so that God and the soul are co-dwelling. They're co-dwelling. They dwell in the heart next to each other. Other groups say that no, God is all pervasive. So all pervasiveness means that he is pervading from the outside, but he's also pervading from the inside. So he pervades the very substance of the soul. He pervades inside the soul as well, like that. So if he pervades inside the soul, of course, then the soul can never be alone, because God is always with him, because God is always pervading him. So in a sense, the idea of total isolation, or kaivalya mukti, or kaivalyam, right, is not possible according to certain schools of Vaishnava philosophy. But according to other schools, it could be possible, because if God is dwelling from the outside of the soul, but even then, if God is only dwelling from the outside of the soul, then how is it possible for the soul to be alone? How is kaivalyam, or isolation, possible? Now here we see in the Bhagavatam, the word kaivalyam isn't used. The word ekatvam is used. Now ekatvam is different from kaivalyam. Kaivalyam means isolation, but ekatvam means oneness with the Lord, right? Oneness. Eka means one. So ekatvam means oneness with the Lord, or basically merging into the Lord. In what sense? It'd be very interesting to read the commentaries on this verse by different acharyas of different groups in Srimad Bhagavatam, because they would have to explain what their actual definition of ekatvam is. But in any case, leaving alone the idea of ekatvam or kaivalyam or impersonal liberation, some form of impersonal liberation, which is roundly rejected by most Vaishnavas, right? Even these other forms, which are accepted by Vaishnava Sampradayas, Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, and Sarupya, and even Sayuja, which is given in the Vedas and the Upanishads as a type of liberation, and accepted by some as a type of personal liberation, and by others as not. But even those are rejected. Even those are rejected by a person who is, according to the translation here, a pure devotee. In other words, the idea of Lord Kapila here in this Bhagavatam verse is to say, and why is this under this heading of devotional service is the ultimate goal? What he's saying is that the interpretation of this verse, according to Gaudiya Acharyas here in Hari Bhakti Vilas, is that all of these things do not constitute devotional service to the Lord. So that's a sort of a tall order to try to prove that, right? Because it seems to me that Salokya, Sarsti, Samipya, Sarupya, right, all except Ekatva, merging into the oneness of the Lord, all seem to indicate that one goes to Vaikuntha, and in Vaikuntha, if one has a personal relationship with God, then he's serving God. Or at least or maybe in Goloka Vrindavan, whatever the concept is, these are all personal types of liberation in which the personality of the soul is serving God. So it's hard to understand the idea that a person who wants to serve God would reject forms of eternal service to God. But here it is in the Bhagavatam. So it's a very interesting verse, and it needs a lot of explanation. And it will be explained differently according to the concept of the goal of the types of liberation according to the different groups. Now, Gaudiya Vaishnavas tend to have this idea that these types of liberation occur in Goloka or beyond this material world, and therefore, because they have a concept of devotional service such that they are so surrendered that they believe that even if we serve the Lord here or there, it doesn't matter to us. So wherever we serve Him, it's fine. That is the goal. That is the goal of service. The goal is service, and we shouldn't think of the other part of it, which is beyond this material world. So the idea of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is that it doesn't matter whether we're in this world or we're in some other world, the goal is service, like that. Therefore, when they say that he's not interested, the person who's interested in service is not interested in Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, Sarupya, or Ekatva. He's not interested in liberation if it doesn't include devotional service. That should be understood, right? But as I said, most of these forms of liberation include devotional service, and so therefore it needs some explanation as to why these other forms of personal liberation are included. If the last line is to be accepted, that the sevanam of the seva, the service of the Lord, if it's without service, I can't conceive. See, it's a very interesting sloka because it says vina. Vina means without my service, without the service of the Lord. Most of these things, except for Ekatvam, without the service of the Lord, these others, Salokya, Sarshi, Samipya, and Sarupya, don't exist. So it's sort of weird that it's put in there like that. We really want to read the different acharyas' comments on this particular verse. Anyhow, the reason that it's here is to point out the fact that devotional service is the thing that we aspire for, and that's the ultimate goal, and not just liberation. Because normally, in the Vedic scriptures, there are purushartas, and purushartas means Purusha means persons or human beings. Artha means the goals of human beings. So there are four major goals in life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Right. So dharma, religiosity; artha, economic development; kama means sense gratification. The last one is moksha. The ultimate one is moksha, or to attain liberation. Now, the Vaishnavas, all Vaishnava sampradayas, define that liberation as active service to the Supreme Lord, except in the case of this idea of Kaivalya Mukti, which is accepted by some Vaishnavas and not accepted by others as actual liberation. Many Vaishnavas do not accept it as actual liberation. Again, it's listed here in the Bhagavatam as a type of liberation. So if you take the Bhagavatam to be a pramana, a great shastric proof, this is a proof that that is the type of liberation, ekatvam, or merging into the Lord, oneness with the Lord. So some Vaishnavas don't accept that as actual liberation. They say that's not real liberation, that's not eternal, because liberation is eternal. Once you're liberated, you can never return to this material world. You always are engaged in the eternal service of the Lord. So if there's a situation which is not eternal, that can't be actually properly defined as liberation. But sometimes in the scriptures, we find that impersonal liberation is defined as eternal. And sometimes we find that it is a gray area. It may sound like it's eternal, but maybe it's not eternal, according to some other interpretation. So it's a really complex subject, and it needs a lot more research, at least by me. Right? Others may have already researched and know more than me. But there's a few things that we can draw, few conclusions we can draw from this verse being in the Bhagavatam. Number one, the Bhagavatam is a Shastra, and if we follow that, if we accept the Shastra Pramana of the Bhagavatam, right, which Gaudiya Vaishnavas accept as a supreme scripture, like that, other Vaishnavas might have some Vedic texts which they'd say overrule this idea. But if we accept the Bhagavatam is saying here that Sarupya, Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, Sarupya, and Ekatva, these are 5 types of actual liberation or eternal freedom from birth and death. They're 5 goals that people can have which are eternal, like that. At the same time, what it's saying is it's recommending that one not choose these as goals of life, but that one should solely try to serve the Lord, and the devotional service of the Lord is much, much greater than any one of these, or any one of these separately, or even all of them together, like that. So that's very interesting. So text 604. Now, again, under the heading of devotional service is the ultimate goal, or the ultimate, we could say, sometimes people say the Panchama Purushartha, the 5th human goal of human life, right? And sometimes people say that's Prema, but here it's basically saying that is devotional service, or service to the Lord. And that can come in different ways. So in the 9th canto, 4th chapter, 67th verse, in the story of Ambarish in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, "My devotees, who are always satisfied to be engaged in my loving service, are not interested even in the 4 kinds of liberation, although these are automatically achieved by their service. What then is to be said of such perishable happiness as elevation to the high planetary systems?" Okay, so this gives us, again, from the Bhagavatam, so it's from the same scripture, so it should be taken as, it shouldn't be taken as having a contrary meaning. So in the context of being in the Bhagavatam also, even though it's in a different canto, right? King Ambarish is saying here, or it's being spoken here by the Lord, that there are 4 types of liberation. So now this is interesting, because if we accept the 3rd canto verse and we accept the 9th canto verse, the 3rd canto verse talks about 5 types of liberation. The 9th canto verse talks about 4 types of liberation. And it says, it explains the ones it means too. Salokyadi. So adi means beginning with. So sometimes if you put adi at the end of something, it's like in English we put etc. So we can say Salokya, etc. If we look in the first verse, it says here, Salokya, Sarsti, Samipya, Sarupya. What's missing? Ekatva. Ekatva. So here we see that the Bhagavatam is saying that is giving a little bit more information. The Bhagavatam here is saying that these are automatically attained by service, which is what I said, is that I don't see in the first verse, in the third canto verse, how these forms of liberation, Salokya, Sarsti, Samipya, and Sarupya, which are all personal types of liberation, also include the devotional service of the Lord. So we shouldn't be afraid of those. Those can also be our goals because they also include devotional service. Whereas the last one is not mentioned in the ninth canto. It's not mentioned in the ninth canto. So in the first verse from the third canto, the idea is that we should be not looking for these goals specifically, but we should be looking for the devotional service to the Lord. And then the ninth canto verse clarifies what was said in the third canto and explains it a little bit more, which is only natural that an instruction which comes after ninth canto comes after third canto would explain or give more detail about what was spoken before. So here he's talking, whoever's speaking this, the Lord is speaking this, he's saying that there are these four types of personal liberation, beginning with Salokya, which was mentioned by me in the third canto, right? And those all include the devotional service of the Lord, right? So my devotees will take to those, right? They're always satisfied by engaging in his loving service wherever, but in the spiritual world, these are four types of liberation, which include that devotional service. Whereas you see here, the Lord has not mentioned the last one. He's not mentioned ekatva, or merging into himself like that. Therefore, we can understand from this that a deeper analysis of the third canto verse in the ninth canto shows us that the Lord recommends devotional service can be done in this world, can also be done in the spiritual world under the conditions of these four types of personal liberation, but not, since he's left it out, not in the position of ekatvam, which is merging into the oneness with the Lord, like that, which is a reason for Vaishnavas to doubt that it's actually a permanent form of liberation, or that it's actually a goal that should be looked for. So it's certainly there are no Vaishnavas who aspire for that ekatvam, or oneness with the Lord, like that. They all want an active liberation, eternal service to the Lord. Okay, so that's interesting. All right, so what to speak of, mundane, happiness that we get in this world or in the higher planetary systems, Swargaloka, heaven in this world. So continuing on with text 605, it says, the glories of the devotees that have been mentioned in this book also apply to Bhakti Devi, because the glories of the devotees and the glories of devotional service are identical. Because why? Because the devotees are the embodiment of devotional service. A devotee's got to be devoted. A servant's got to serve. So if you're a devoted servant of the Lord, you do devotional service to the Lord. So you are like the personification of that service. And so here also, Bhakti Devi, being the very personification of devotional service, she is the quintessential devotee. She's the quintessential one who performs devotional service. Right. So in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, sometimes they talk about Bhakti Devi as the personification of devotional service. At other times, she's considered to be personified as Srimati Radharani or Radha, like that. So the very word Radha, the very name Radha, comes from the word aradhana, or to worship or to serve, like that. So she is service personified. She is devotional service personified. So sometimes she's conceived of as Radha, and sometimes she's conceived of as a separate personality, but definitely related to Radha. Right. So text 606. In the same way, the glories of the worship of the Supreme Lord, the glories of the worship of his associates, the glories of hearing and chanting the holy names, are all to be referred to as the glories of devotional service because these are limbs of devotional service. So devotional service has different aspects to it, which here is meant is called limbs. The Sanskrit is angam, anga, taranganam, tarangaram, of the limbs, of those limbs, right? So the limbs of devotional service include the glories of the Lord, the glories of the worship of the Lord, the glories of the worship of his associates, and the glories of hearing and chanting his holy names. So these are all different aspects or limbs or angas of devotional service. So now here's a heading. Devotional service to the Supreme Lord is eternal. So until one relishes the nectarian mellows of discussions of Lord Vishnu, which while fully engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, he will continue to suffer the threefold miseries of material existence while undergoing the tribulations of birth, death, old age, and disease. Right. So it's a way, and the word here for devotional service to the Lord is Vishnu Bhakti. The nectarian mellows, Rasika Saram, right? Rasika Saram. Vishesha, special Rasika Saram. Okay. Nice. So later on in the Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, 4th verse, there's a prayer offered by Lord Brahma in this connection. My dear Lord, devotional service unto you is the best path for self-realization. If someone gives up that path and engages in the cultivation of speculative knowledge, he will simply undergo a troublesome process and will not achieve his desired result. As a person who beats an empty husk of wheat cannot get grain, one who simply speculates cannot achieve self-realization. His only gain is trouble. One who speculates cannot achieve self-realization. His only gain is trouble. So mental speculation based on, study of the scriptures, I guess, the idea here is that the path of speculative knowledge or jnana, right, is decried, and the path of simple, the best path of self-realization is considered to be actual service to the Lord. And by that service, the person will become self-realized. So later on, so that's from the 10th canto. So we've gone from 3rd canto, 9th canto, 10th canto. Now we're going to hear from the 11th canto, 5th chapter, verses 2 and 3. Each of the 4 social orders, headed by the Brahmanas, are born through different combinations of modes of nature from the face, arms, thighs, and feet of the Supreme Lord of the universal form. Thus, the 4 spiritual orders were also generated. If any of the members of the 4 varnas or 4 ashramas fail to worship the personality of Godhead, who is the source of their own creation, they will fall down from their position into a hellish state of life. So this is known from the Purusha Suktam of the Rig Veda. Brahmanosya makamasi bahu rajan nipitaha uru tarasya vaishaha padyam shudro ajayata. So it says that from the face of the Lord was created the Brahman caste or the Brahman class of person, the intellectuals, right? From the arms were created the Kshatriyas or the politicians, the administrators, right? From the thighs were created or stomach or thighs was created the Vaishyas or the business people, and workers were created from the feet, like that. So these classes of human beings, the classes of members of society, and every society has these classes. Okay, intellectuals, administrators, entrepreneurs, and workers. So those different classes appear from these different parts of the Supreme Lord. The universe being the body of the Lord, So from his body, I've created these different classes of people according to different modes of nature in this material world. Okay, so they're all meant to worship the Supreme Lord because they all come from the Supreme Lord. They're all his property, and he created them. So if you don't think that, then they don't have any position. So their position as members in those four classes is taken away from them if they don't engage in the service of the Lord or the devotional service of the Lord. So now coming to text 611, which is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 15, by the Lord says, Namam Duskritina Mudha Papadyante. Now this is describing the four types of persons of those different classes actually. Namam Duskritina Mudha Papadyante na Damamaya Pritigyana Asuram Bhavamashrita. Right? There's also another verse. These are persons that do not surrender to the Lord. Four kinds of persons do not surrender unto me. They are those who are foolish, the lowest amongst mankind, those whose intelligence is stolen by Maya or illusion, and who are demoniac. So, if we see that Srila Prabhupada used to explain about this, that he would, so we can look at Duskritino or Mudha doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. So he is more or less like the worker or the Shudra, right, who doesn't know what is right and what is wrong. The Naradama is a person who is considered the lowest of mankind because he may be in search of wealth. So this also, there are four types of people mentioned in the previous verse or next verse, I'm not sure. The previous verse, Chaturvida Bhajanti Mam Jnana Sukitino Juna Arto, I think it's the next verse, 16. Arto Jigyasharatati Jnani Chabarita Shabbat. So there's the person in search of freedom from distress, which is the Sudra, right? The person who wants gain, which means economic gain or whatever type of gain, that is the Vaishya or the entrepreneur, the worker, then the entrepreneur. Then we have the inquisitive person, right? Like that is the administrator or politician, right? And then the one the Jnani or the one in knowledge is the intellectual Brahman. Okay, so here we're talking about those are the people who surrender to the Lord. These are the people who don't surrender to the Lord, and the Duskritina is the Shudra, or the worker. The Naradama is the Vaishya. The Mayaprita Jnana is the Brahman, right? Whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. And the Asura Bhavamashrita is the demoniac leader or the demoniac politician or entrepreneur, industrialist, let's say, something like that. Yeah, these different. Okay, so then continuing on with text 612 and 613, it's stated, each of the limbs of devotional service that has been described are eternal functions, and so it must be concluded that devotional service itself is an eternal constitutional position of the living entity, right? Because all the limbs are eternal. Therefore, when you put them all together, all the aspects are eternal, so then the thing itself is eternal. Now, a limb is called an anga in Sanskrit. What is an angi is the thing which has the limbs, the owner of the limbs, the whole thing is called the angi. So, for instance, your body and mind and everything, that is the angi, right? And including the body, mind, and soul together is the angi. But the different limbs, the arms, legs, feet, like that, these are different angas or limbs or aspects of the body, right? Okay. So because the limbs are eternal, the whole has to be eternal also. The symptoms of devotional service are clearly mentioned in the Vedic literature, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so we can continue to describe them in more detail. So now he's going to describe the Bhagavad Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. We're going to describe the symptoms of devotional service. What are the symptoms? So first of all, some general symptoms. Maybe he'll get into some specific symptoms after this, but first of all, some general symptoms. Right, so in the third canto, 25th chapter, verse 32, Lord Kapila says, of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? The senses are symbolic representations of the demigods. Okay? And their natural inclination is to work under the direction of Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representative of the demigods, so the mind is a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you can imagine the mind is directing the senses. So in the same way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is directing all the other devatas, all these lower demigods, we sometimes call them devata. So the mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better than even salvation. That is far better than salvation. So once again, here in this verse is he's making there's a comparison being made between liberation or salvation on the one hand and devotional service, and devotional service is considered to be far better. So here, text 615 to 618, now some specific symptoms of sadhana bhakti, okay? So now just remember, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, bhakti is devotion, right? So bhakti is devotion. Sometimes it's called bhakti yoga, the process of devotion, right? The process of reuniting with the Supreme in loving service to God through devotion, right? So that's to distinguish it from the other paths of effort like karma yoga and jnana yoga. It's called bhakti or bhakti yoga, okay? So when we say sadhana, sadhana means the type of bhakti that's done for some purpose. So here the purpose being described is just the service of the Lord. Devotional service is the purpose. That is the goal here, devotional service, not anything else, not liberation, right? But beyond liberation, service itself is the goal. And so therefore it's called sadhana because it's not sadhya, it's not accomplished, but it's a process to be accomplished. So sadhya means it's already accomplished. Sadhana means it's a process by which we accomplish something else. So the other thing is, the thing which is accomplished here by bhakti is also bhakti, is devotional service. So bhakti is for bhakti's sake. Devotion is for devotion's sake, is for service's sake, like that. So here, specific symptoms of sadhana bhakti are going to be described from Godumiya Tantra. Now, again, according to Gaudiya Vaishnavas, there's different types of sadhana bhakti. This is not to be confused with Vaidhi bhakti and Raganuga bhakti, which are both sadhanas, right? There is also Ragatmika bhakti. Ragatmika means the type of perfected bhakti, which is performed by the residents of Goloka Vrindavan or the residents of Vaikuntha, right? That is completely pure. That is accomplished bhakti. That is sadhya bhakti, okay? Ragatmika bhakti. But Vaidhi bhakti is according to vidhis or rules and regulations, prohibitions and exemptions or whatever. And the Raganuga bhakti is following in the footsteps of a Ragatmika bhakta, a person who has perfected his bhakti, right, in the spiritual world, and his or her. And that Raganuga bhakti is also a sadhana bhakti. It's also not, it's to achieve the goal. What is the goal? The goal is pure bhakti. So there are two ways to attain pure bhakti: Vaidhi bhakti and Raganuga bhakti, according to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So both of them are sadhana bhaktis, methods to achieve the goal. The goal is also bhakti, but the goal is pure bhakti. Okay, so here these are sadhana bhaktis, which are talked about in the Godumiya Tantra. So let's see if they talk about Vaidhi bhakti or Raganuga bhakti, or if they make a distinction between the two, because these are two different sadhana bhaktis. Okay. So here's some verses from Godumiya Tantra. And it says, Lord Krishna becomes pleased with one who possesses these 8 symptoms of devotion to him, for him, to or for him. The mantras he chants, the spiritual master who imparted these mantras, affection for the devotees of the Lord, engagement in the worship of the Lord, the giving up of pride, worshiping the Lord with faith and devotion, having attachment for hearing narrations of the Lord's pastimes, singing and dancing before the Lord, always remembering the Lord and surrendering one's life to the Lord. If even a Malecha manifests these 8 symptoms of devotional service, he will certainly become a truthful, glorious, liberated soul in this very lifetime. Okay, so again, it's saying becoming a liberated soul in one's very lifetime. So I'm not sure what the Sanskrit is for that up here, but anyway, that's the translation. So let's just deal with the translation. So becoming a liberated soul even within this lifetime, that concept or doctrine is called Jiva Mukti, like that. It's a doctrine which is accepted by Adi Shankaracharya and by some other Vaishnavas also, and but is also not accepted by some Vaishnavas like this. But here we see if the translation is correct, right? And we have to check it like that on the proof of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is saying that one can become liberated even in this lifetime. So that's an important point. We would also like to see the purports by different acharyas in different sects and things like that on this part of the Bhagavatam to explain more about this concept of Jivan Mukti, whether one can be actually considered liberated in this very lifetime within the material body, or whether it is only at the fall of the body, the material body, which is called Videha Mukti, that liberation can occur. In any case, that's the end of the discussion there, that one is considered to be liberated even within this very lifetime, if he has these 8 symptoms of devotional service, right? So what are they again? The mantras he chants, spiritual master imparted those mantras, the affection for the devotees of the Lord, engagement in the worship of the Lord, giving up pride, worshipping the Lord with faith and devotion, attachment for hearing narrations of the Lord, singing and dancing before the Lord, always remembering the Lord and surrendering one's life to the Lord. That's actually 10. We'll have to look through because it says here 8. So to see exactly where, which ones are which, we have to go to the Sanskrit, because he's put a lot of commas in there and it seems like he's given us 10 things. Okay, anyway, that's that involves probably going through the Sanskrit and looking and seeing exactly what those 8 symptoms are. But in any case, all of the translation by the person who's translated here indicates that the main point to be understood here is that one can, that this type of devotional service talked about in Godumiya Tantra is so effective that it right, this is Godumiya Tantra. I'm sorry, it's not the Bhagavatam. That it basically makes one liberated even in this lifetime. Okay, I wonder if we can find something in Srimad Bhagavatam like this to say that that talks about Jiva Mukti. Okay, so check text 619 and 620, again coming back to the Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 5th chapter, verses 23 to 24. These are very famous verses like that. This is the definition of Navada Bhakti given by Prahlad, by Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishno, Smaranam Parasevanam, Archanam Bandhanam Dasyam, Satyamatmani Vedanam, Iti Pumsat Pitadishnao. Bhaktis Chainava, I think I'm not sure if it's Chainava or Chainaiva. Oh no, Nava Lakshana. Chain, Nava Lakshana. Nava Lakshana means these are the 9 angas or the 9 qualities or qualities or qualifications, or Lakshanas are qualities, distinguishing qualities, yeah. Defining qualities, that's it. Creator Bhagavat Yada Tanmanye Ditam Uttamam. Hearing the chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with the 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord one's best friend and surrendering everything to him. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. in the text 621, in the conversation between Narada Muni and King Yudhisthira, recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 11th chapter, verse 11, it says, devotional service to the Lord consists of hearing about the activities and instructions given by the saintly personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the saintly persons. Sorry, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the saintly persons. Chanting about these activities and instructions, always remembering these activities and instructions, trying to render service, performing worship, offering obeisance, becoming a servant, becoming a friend, and surrendering one's whole self. So that's even repeated in the Bhagavatam. So first of all, Prahlad gives us, he's given in the 7th canto, 5th chapter, and then again in the 7th canto, 11th chapter, a little later on, Narada Muni repeats the idea of this Navada Bhakti, these 9 different activities of servitorship, right? I'm not sure if he gives all 9 here in this verse here. In the Ramayana also, Valmiki Ramayana, there's a definition of Navada Bhakti. I don't remember the verse offhand, but if somebody contacts me, we can look it up and we can find. There's also a definition given in the Ramayana of nine Navada Bhakti. So Navada Bhakti is 9 forms of Bhakti, is a standard understanding about Bhakti and different defining qualities of Bhakti. Text 622. In a conversation between Yamaraj and Dhumraketu, that's recorded in the Kartik Mahatmya section of Padma Purana, it's stated, so this is from Padma Purana, Shravanam Kirtanam Puja, Sarva Karma Panam Smritihi. It's a slightly different order, but similar acts of devotion are being described here. Parishcharya Namaskaraha, Prema Swatmapanam Harau. Hearing, chanting, worshipping the Lord, this is a very nice verse also. Okay. Hearing, chanting, worshipping the Lord, offering all of one's activities to the Lord, remembering, serving, offering obeisances to the Lord, cultivating love for the Lord, and surrendering oneself fully to the Lord are the causes by which one can please him. Text 623 to 626. In the conversation between Lord Shiva and Parvati that is recorded in Padma Purana, these verses are found. Decorating one's body with the symbols of Lord Hari's conch shell, discus, and other weapons is the first symptom of devotional service. Decorating one's forehead with tilak, accepting initiation into the chanting of Vishnu mantras. Worshipping the Lord, chanting mantras, meditating on the Lord, remembering his holy names, glorifying the Lord, offering prayers to the Lord, serving his lotus feet, accepting the water that washed his lotus feet, honoring the remnants of the Lord's food, serving Vaishnavas, observing vows such as Dwadasi, and planting Tulsi. These 16 methods of devotional service to the Lord have been ascertained as the causes of liberation from material bondage. Continues on, it's also stated, may also be from the same place, we don't know, which was Padma Purana, having the darshan of the deities, touching the deity, traveling to holy places of pilgrimage, smelling the incense that's offered to the deity, honoring the Lord's flower garland, dancing before the deities, playing musical instruments before the deity, enacting Krishna's pastimes, hearing and chanting Srimad Bhagavatam, wearing beads made of lotus seeds, right? Because it's stated also, ye kanta lagna tulasi nalinaksha mala. Nalinaksha means lotus seeds, right? Which represent Lakshmi. Right, so the Vaishnavas, they wear Tulsi, which represents Vishnu, and Lakshmi, Nalinaksha, which represents Lakshmi. Staying awake the entire night on Ekadasi, right? So there's a system of observing one meal on Ekadasi, 1 meal on Dwadasi, and complete fasting on Ekadasi, and staying up all night on the night of Ekadasi, and performing devotional activities like hearing and chanting, etc. Helping to construct temples for the service of the Lord, holding festivals, and all such similar activities that are described in the scriptures are to be understood as symptoms of devotional service. Text 630 to 631. It should be understood that all the characteristics of the Supreme Lord and his devotees are also symptoms of devotional service. Among all the above-mentioned symptoms of devotional service, experienced devotees accept some of them as primary and some of them as secondary. Some of them are considered external symptoms, and some of them are considered internal symptoms. All right, so that's interesting. Text 632. There are different grades of persons engaged in devotional service to the Lord. These classifications are based on the mood of the practitioner, making devotional service sometimes mixed with the desires for fruitive activities, right, which means karma mishra bhakti in Sanskrit, and sometimes mixed with the desire to cultivate knowledge of Brahman or the Supreme, right? That is called jnana mishra bhakti, right? But of course, the Goswamis like Rupa Goswami and Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu has described, he's defined Uttama Bhakti, or the supreme form of Bhakti, or the purest Bhakti, or the purest devotional service to the Lord, as being jnana kamadi and avartam, as devoid of these desires for fruitive activities and cultivation of knowledge. So devoid of those desires, like that. Here we will not discuss these distinctions. Okay, so there are other books of the Goswamis and Gaudiya Vaishnavas that discuss the differences between Kama Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, and Pure Bhakti, Shuddha Bhakti. Here, we will not discuss these distinctions. For an elaborate description of classes of devotees, one should refer to other literature such as Muktapala. So apparently there's a book called Muktapala Adi. There are books beginning with Muktapala. I've never heard of this book, Muktapala, but maybe it's not extant anymore, but this is, he's suggesting go and look in another book, which describes this in full. Okay, so then text 633. When one attains the perfectional stage of loving devotional service, the four objectives of life, religiosity, dharma, economic development, artha, sense gratification, kama, and liberation, moksha, automatically serve one. What more can be said? Even the Supreme Lord comes under the control of pure devotees. Therefore, the symptoms of loving devotional service are now being described. Okay, so now we're going to get more. This is the symptoms of Prema Bhakti, right? So before we had a couple of verses there or suggestions that there were different types of bhakti, sadhana bhakti, that might have been mixed with the desires for fruitive activities and mental speculation, right? So or speculative knowledge, right, about Brahman. That is Kama Mishra and Jnana Mishra Bhakti. So he has skipped right over that. He's just saying that exists. If you want to know about it, go to some other book, because here what's more important is we want to talk about pure devotional service, and that is Prema Bhakti. So what are the symptoms of Prema Bhakti? So continuing on with text 634, the symptoms of loving devotional service, or Prema Bhakti Lakshanam. In Narada Pancharatra, it's stated, great souls such as Bhishma, Prahlad, Uddhava, and Narada have described unalloyed loving attachment and service to the Supreme Lord as loving devotional service. So this is basically something of a definition of Prema Bhakti, and who is describing it. Text 635 to 636. It should be clearly understood that loving devotional service is superior to ordinary devotional service. The actual fruit of bhakti or devotional service is Prema Bhakti, loving devotional service. So far, we have described some of the external and internal symptoms of the treasure of love of God. Now we will describe the glories of loving devotional service, Prema Bhakti. So, Ata Prema Sampati Chinnani. Chinnani means symptoms. Right. So in the 7th canto, 7th chapter, verses 34 to 36 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj, or Bhakta Prahlad, is instructing his classmates in the Gurukul as follows. One who is situated in devotional service is certainly the controller of his senses, and thus he's a liberated person. When such a liberated person, the pure devotee, hears of the transcendental qualities and activities of the Lord's incarnations for the performance of various pastimes, his hair stands on end on his body, right? He gets this hair standing on him. Horripilation, chicken skin, we call it sometimes, horripilation, right? He's crying from ecstasy. And in his spiritual realization, his voice falters. His voice falters. He gets choked up emotionally. Sometimes he very openly dances, sometimes he sings loudly, and sometimes he cries out. Thus, he expresses his transcendental jubilation. These are all called astasaptika vichar. There are 8 symptoms. There's probably more, but there are 8 basic symptoms of a person that's in ecstasy. Like that. When a devotee becomes like a person haunted by a ghost, he laughs and very loudly chants about the qualities of the Lord. In fact, one of the alwars is called Pei Alwar. And Pei in Tamil means ghost. So he was just like a ghost because he was in so much ecstasy. He appeared like a ghost. Sometimes he sits to perform meditation and offers respects to every living entity, considering him a devotee of the Lord. Constantly breathing very heavily, he becomes careless of social etiquette. And loudly chants like a madman, Hare Krishna, oh my Lord, oh Master of the universe. Interesting. So the devotee is then freed from all material contamination because he constantly thinks of the Lord's pastimes and because his mind and body have been converted to spiritual qualities. Because of his intense devotional service, his ignorance, material consciousness, and all kinds of material desires are completely burned to ashes. This is the stage at which one can achieve the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Kavi spoke these, so continuing on, verses 640 to 641. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, 2nd chapter, verses 39 and 40, Kavi is one of the Nava Yogendras, the 9 Yogendras, great saints, has spoken the following verses. An intelligent person who has controlled his mind and conquered fear should give up all attachment to material objects such as wife, family, and nation, and should wander freely without embarrassment, hearing and chanting the holy names of the Lord, the bearer of the chariot wheel. Right, so the devotees of the Lord, you can see the devotees, they go out in the streets, they go out and they chant the holy name of the Lord, and without embarrassment, they just go out because they just want to chant the holy name of the Lord. They're in ecstasy. The holy names of Krishna are all auspicious because they describe the transcendental birth and activities which he performs within this world for the salvation of conditioned souls. Thus, the holy names of the Lord are sung throughout the world. By chanting the holy name of the Supreme Lord, one comes to the stage of love of Godhead. Then the devotee is fixed in his vow as an eternal servant of the Lord. He gradually becomes very much attached to a particular name and form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As his heart melts with ecstatic love, he laughs very loudly and cries and shouts. Sometimes he sings and dances like a madman, for he is indifferent to public opinion. Text 640 to 640, 42 to 643. In the 11th canto, 3rd chapter, verses 31 to 32, Prabhupada speaks these verses. The devotees of the Lord constantly discuss the glories of the personality of Godhead amongst themselves. Thus, they constantly remember the Lord and remind one another of his qualities and pastimes. In this way, by their devotion to principles of Bhakti Yoga, the devotees please the personality of Godhead, who takes away from them everything inauspicious. Being purified of all impediments, the devotees awaken the pure love of Godhead. And thus, even within this world, their spiritualized bodies exhibit symptoms of transcendental ecstasy, such as standing of the bodily hairs on end. Having achieved love of Godhead, the devotees sometimes cry out loud, absorbed in thought of the infallible Lord. Sometimes they laugh, feel great pleasure, speak out loud to the Lord, dance and sing. Such devotees, having transcended material conditioned life, sometimes imitate the unborn Supreme by acting out his pastimes, and sometimes achieving his personal audience, they remain peaceful and silent. Text 644 and 645. in a conversation between the Supreme Lord and Uddhava that is recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 14th chapter, verses 23 and 24, the following verses appear. If one's hairs do not stand on end, how can the heart melt? And if the heart does not melt, how can tears of love flow from the eyes? If one does not cry in spiritual happiness, how can one render loving service to the Lord? And without such service, how can the consciousness be purified? The devotee, whose speech is sometimes choked up, whose heart melts, who cries continually and sometimes laughs, who feels ashamed and cries out loudly and then dances, a devotee thus fixed in loving service to me purifies the entire universe. Text 646. It is the duty of those who are unable to perform loving devotional service, as has been described, to completely surrender to the lotus feet of Lord Hari, the destroyer of all types of fears. I'd like to know where that statement comes from. If that's in the Bhagavatam, that's 23 and 24. And this next one, we don't know where that's from. But that's very interesting. So, if you cannot perform loving devotional service, if you find that too difficult to do, or somehow you can't do it, then you should just simply surrender to the Lord. That's a very nice sloka. I wonder where it's from. Now we're going to hear about the process of surrender. Text 647. Surrender is called Sharanagati, or Prapati, right? And here it said Ata Sharanapati. So the process of surrender in Bhagavad Gita 1866, which is the famous last instruction of Lord Krishna, the Charma Sloka, it stated, Sarva dharman parityajya mām ekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam, here it's aham tvam, but it could be also aham tva, the word is the same, it's the same word, no problem. Sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Okay, so there's a huge amount of literature that is and purport that to this particular verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the most important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which talks about surrender, and it's mentioned. It's given here in this section on the process of surrender. So there's too much meaning in this verse to go into it in detail. But if anybody wants to learn more about this verse in detail, there are discussions of this verse in detail on the same YouTube channel. You can go and look at the playlist Mumukshapadi by Pillai Lokacharya with a commentary by Manavala Mahmudi. Also in the Charmasoka Praparanam, there's a part about this particular verse. And you could also look at my lectures also on discussions on Mumukshapadi. It's a separate playlist, both of those are English lectures on that. Otherwise, if you write to the email address at the end of this video, you can ask me and I can send you several articles in different books describing the glories of this verse and what it actually means, the interpretation by different acharyas and different sects and sampradayas. Very, very important verse. It's too much to go into all that in this context. So let's continue on. But it's notable. It's notable that the Goswamis have listed this verse in the very first part of the section on surrender. Okay, so text 648 and 649. In the 11th canto, 12th chapter, verses 14 to 15, in a conversation between the Supreme Lord and Uddhava, in Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, therefore, my dear Uddhava, abandon the Vedic mantras as well as the procedures of supplementary Vedic literatures and their positive and negative injunctions. Disregard that which has been heard and that which is to be heard. That which is heard and that which is to be heard. Shrotavyam and shrutam evacha. Okay. Simply take shelter of me alone, for I am the personality of Godhead situated within the heart of all conditioned souls. Take shelter of me wholeheartedly, and by my grace be free from fear in all circumstances. So the Lord, even in Srimad Bhagavatam here in the 11th canto, is describing the process of bhakti or sharanagati or surrender, to take refuge at the feet of the Lord. Remember how we got into surrender was that there was a statement there in just before, in a few verses back, that said, if one cannot perform pure devotional service or prema bhakti, then one should surrender to the Lord. Of course, within pure devotional service is surrender, but so sometimes it's thought surrender is thought of as an anga or a lakshana or an aspect or limb of devotional service. And in Atmani Vedana, for example, part of Navada Bhakti. But sometimes it's also considered a separate process by itself, especially for those who are unable to, for whatever reason, perform Prema Bhakti. So here we have text 650 to 652. Surrender is eternal. So in the Brahma Vaivakta Purana, it's stated, those who do not take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Govinda, even after receiving the human form of life, which is rarely attained and desired even by the demigods, will certainly fall down into an ocean of terrible miseries. After going through 8,400,000 species of life, if one does not surrender unto the lotus feet of Lord Govinda, it is to be understood that such a proud and insignificant person has attained the human form of life in vain. So the human form of life is especially meant to take to the devotional service of the Lord and to surrender to the Lord, like that. So that is the meaning also in the Vedanta Sutra where it says, Tata Brahma Jigyasa. Now is the time that you have a human form of life, right? And you're able to comprehend spiritual knowledge, to inquire about the Supreme. So what he's saying here is now, because you're a human being, it's described in the Brahma Vaivakta Purana, now is the time to take advantage of being a human being and surrender to the Lord. So 653, the glories of surrender. So this would be a Mahatmyam explaining the glories of surrender. In the connection with Vibhishana's leaving home, Vibhishana was the brother of Ravana. There are three brothers, Vibhishana, Ravana, and Kumbhakarna. And in some senses, they represent Sattva Guna, Rajaguna, and Tamaguna. So they represent goodness, passion, and ignorance, like that. But anyway, Vibhishana was the brother of Ravana, but he left Ravana, who was the king of Lanka, Sri Lanka, and came to India and surrendered at the feet of Lord Ramachandra in the Ramayana. So this is also explains the glories of surrender. Now, if people want to know a little bit more about the surrender process of Vibhishana to Lord Ramachandra, then if you look on this YouTube channel, there's a series on the playlist called Abhaya Pradana Saram, which is a book by Vedanta Deshika, which explains in very detail, the whole book is about the surrender of Vibhishana to Lord Ramachandra, and how that is a paradigm or a perfect example of surrender to the Lord. So in this connection with Vibhishana leaving home and surrendering to Lord Ramachandra spoke this verse within, which is found in the Ramayana. Now, the verse that's being given is compared to this verse before of Bhagavad Gita. So the verse in Bhagavad Gita on surrender is Sarvadhamam Pritaja Mamekam Sharanam Aham Sarvapapabhyo Mokshishunimasu. This is considered to be the final order of Lord Krishna to surrender to him. So similarly, Lord Rama also has a verse called the Ramacharma Sloka, which comes in the Ramayana, which we're now going to hear, right? And it is Sakrideva Papannaya. Okay, so it's written a little bit differently here, but I'll tell you, if you look in the Valmiki Ramayana, the verse is actually Sakrideva Papannaya, Tavasmiti Chayachite, Abhayam Sarvabhute Bhyo, Dadamye Tad Vatam Mama. Okay, so here, due to transliteration from Bengali script, there's some difference, and also there's some minor differences in the verse as it's being written here. So here it says Sakrideva Prapanno Yas, and then the Ta on the first line should go on the second line. Tavasmiti Chayachite, that's correct. Abhayam sarvada tasmai is incorrect. That is not the correct reading in the Ramayana. Dadam etad vratam, that should be a V instead of a B. Vratam mama. Vratam means his promise. It's the Lord's promise. It's his vow. It's his vow to Abhayam sarvada tasmai. Sarvada tasmai. Okay, sarvabhute bhyo is the correct reading. From all living beings, or to all living beings. I extend my protection from all living beings to you, or to all living beings. Right. Both meanings can be there. So again, if you go to the playlist on Abhaya Pradana Saram, the exact wording and the exact meanings of this verse from Ramayana is being explained. Let's see what the translator has made of this particular verse here. Ramacharma Sutta. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is my eternal principle that if any living being takes shelter of me, even once, saying, I am yours, then I award that person freedom from all fear. Right. So, text 654. And as I've mentioned, there are many books which are written about this particular verse from Ramayana also, because it's considered to be the final order of Lord Rama. There are some other final orders. There's the final order of Lord Varaha. Lord Varaha's final order was spoken in the Varaha Purana in the Satya Yuga. Lord Rama's final order was spoken in the Treta Yuga. Lord Krishna's final order was spoken in the Dwapara Yuga. I don't know if there's a final order for the Kali Yuga, but anyway, and there are the other persons who have similar final instructions or ultimate instructions. Anyway, so text 654, the Lord of Vaikuntha, Srimad Narayana, spoke this verse, which is found in the Nrsimha Purana, which is a Upa Purana, not one of the great Puranas, but it's one of the 18 minor Puranas. So, O Lord of Lords, O Janardana, I surrender unto you. One who prays in this way and takes shelter of me, I deliver him from all kinds of material miseries. This is great. This is also sounds like is a prayer of surrender. Very, very nice. Tvam prapanasmi, maybe it should be maybe prapanosmi, but anyway, tvam prapanasmi sharanam deva deva janardanam iti ya sharanam praptastam kleshad udharami aham. So probably should be udaramyaham. Anyway, so that's a very, very interesting verse. We should look it up and see the context of this. Very good. So text 655. Again, Sanat Kumar spoke this verse to Narada regarding offenses against the holy name as found in the Padma Purana. Even if fallen souls who are devoid of all proper conduct, who are cheaters, who have no culture, who are deceitful, who are very proud, who are fond of drinking wine, who are engaged in very grave sinful activities, who are beyond the purview of Vedic society, who are cruel, and who are very attached to wealth and their families, take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Govinda, they will also be liberated from material entanglement. Text 656, from Brahma Bhaivarta Purana, it says, O Shonaka, I promise you again and again that simply by taking shelter of the holy name of Lord Narayana, anyone can be liberated from all kinds of inauspiciousness. Text 657. In the discussion about the age of Kali in this verse, this verse is found in Brihad Naradiya Purana. By surrendering at the lotus feet of Lord Govinda, the absolute truth, the original cause of all existence, and the protector of the surrendered souls, one will surely gain relief from all suffering. Text 658 to 659. In the conversation between Bhishma and King Yudhisthira, recorded in the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata, these verses appear. O King, Lord Krishna, the foremost member of the Yadu dynasty and the possessor of unlimited prowess, is always eager to do good for you and your brothers. Those who take shelter of Lord Hari will certainly cross beyond the insurmountable ocean of material existence. There is no need to consider this point further. Text 660. In a conversation between Vidura and Maitreya, which is found in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 22nd chapter, verse 37, it's stated, therefore, Vidura, how can persons completely under the shelter of Lord Krishna in devotional service be put into miseries pertaining to the body, the mind, nature, and other men and living creatures? Text 661. In a conversation between Prahlad and Bali that is recorded in the Vamana Purana, it's stated, Lord Narayana is without beginning, middle, and end, the spiritual master of the demigods, the giver of auspiciousness, supremely pure and the worshipable Lord of all. Those sober personalities who surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord, the husband of Lakshmi, who is carried on the back of Garuda, do not come under the jurisdiction of Yamaraj. Text 662. Those who take shelter of Lord Narayana, the beloved Lord of Lakshmi, who holds a conch, discus, lotus, and bow in his hands, as he rides on the back of Garuda, who destroys the fear of repeated birth and death, have nothing to fear. Text 663. At the end of the section dealing with Prayaschitta or atonement, that is found in Brihad Naradiya Purana, the following verse appears. There is no doubt that the lives of those who surrender at the lotus feet of Lord Hari become successful, even while living in this material existence, which is full of lethargy, fear, and illusion. Text 664. In the Brahma Purana, it's stated, Yamaraj has no power to punish those who have surrendered their activities, minds, words unto Lord Achyuta, because they have attained the platform of devotional service, which surpasses liberation. Text 665. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 58, it's stated, for one who has accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of cosmic manifestation, and is famous as Mukunda, or the giver of mukti, or liberation, the ocean of material world is like the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's footprint. Padam, or the place where there is no material miseries, or Vaikuntha is his goal, not the place where there is danger at every step. Text 666. In the 1st canto, 1st chapter, verse 15 of Srimad Bhagavatam said, O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Text 667. Shukadev Goswami spoke this verse, which is found in Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 4th chapter, verse 18. Kiratas, Hunas, Andras, Pulindas, Pulkasas, Abhirasas, Shubhas, Yavanas, and members of Kasha races, and even others addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, for he is the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Text 668. Maitreya spoke this verse, which is found in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 23rd chapter, verse 42. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of God at its lotus feet. So it's a question. It's a rhetorical question here. What is difficult? What is difficult for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of God at its lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. Text 669. So this prayer of the wives of the Khalia serpent, right, are found in Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 16th chapter, verse 37. O my Lord, source of all opportunities, I do not desire to enjoy in Dhruvaloka, the heavenly planets, or the planet where Lord Brahma resides, nor do I want to be the supreme ruler of all the earthly planets or the lower planetary systems. I do not desire to be master of the powers of mystic yoga, nor do I want liberation if I if I have to give up your lotus feet. Text 670. Karabhajana spoke this verse, which is found in Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, 5th chapter, verse 41. Anyone who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, giving up all kinds of obligation, and has taken to the path in all seriousness, owes neither duties nor obligations to the demigods, sages, general living entities, family members, humankind, or forefathers. Text 671. Uddhava spoke this verse to Lord Krishna, which is found in Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, 19th chapter, text 9. My dear Lord, for one who has been tormented on the terrible path of birth and death and is constantly overwhelmed by the threefold miseries, I do not see any possible shelter other than your two lotus feet, which are just like a refreshing umbrella that pours down showers of delicious nectar. Text 672. According to the opinion of learned scholars, the best form of surrender is to take complete shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, surrendering one's body, mind, and speech. Text 673 to 674. The symptoms of surrender, right? So, Atha Shanapati Lakshanam, the defining qualities of surrender. I do not know anyone other than Govinda, Paramananda, Mukunda, and Madhusudana. I do not worship anyone else or meditate upon anyone else. I do not offer obeisances to anyone other than Lord Hari. I do not offer prayers to or see anyone other than the Lord. I do not want anyone other than the Supreme Lord, and I do not sing the glories of anyone other than him. Indeed, I never approach anyone other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so this is one-pointed devotion. So the first symptom he's giving here of surrender is one-pointed devotion, giving up devotion to all other great personalities, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So text 675. According to some authorities, this surrender has 6 limbs. Of these, symptoms are more or less based on friendship or Sakya Bhakti, friendship. This is confirmed in the Vaishnava Tantra. So text 676 says, the 6 divisions of surrender are acceptance of those things favorable to devotional service, the rejection of unfavorable things, the conviction that Krishna will give protection, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, full surrender, and humility. Okay, so these actually are from these verses are actually found in Arhibunya Samhita or Pancharatra Agama, and also in the Lakshmi Tantra, which is also a Pancharatra Agama. Here he's saying it's in Vaishnava Tantra, like that. So I don't think that there's actually a book called Vaishnava Tantra, but when he says Tantra, it means Agama. So this is confirmed in those 2 Vaishnava Agamas. So he hasn't said here exactly where it's from, but we can tell you it's from Arhibunya Samhita and Lakshmi Tantra. And if you want the exact quotes, you can get in touch with me. I can let you know about that. Okay, so it's a very, very famous quotation, and this verse is given as a definition of bhakti, or a definition of surrender, right, by both Gaudiya Vaishnavas, as we see here, and Sri Vaishnavas, Ramanuja Vaishnavas. Text 677. One who says, I belong to you, feeling that way in his heart, and who joyfully travels to the holy places that are related to the Supreme Lord, is considered to be a surrendered soul. So again, we take here this word in the first line here. It says tavasmiti, right? So iti, as we said before, iti means thus, and whatever comes before iti is spoken out loud or is to be said, right? So tavasmi means, tava means you, your, right? It means of you, actually, it's genitive. And tavasmi means I am of you, I'm yours, right? Tavasmi is what Lord Rama has asked in his Charma Sloka, Sakrideva Papannaya, tavasmiti chayachate, right? So text 678, Akrura spoke this verse to the Supreme Lord, which is found in Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 48th chapter, verse 26. What learned person would approach anyone but you for shelter when you are the affectionate, grateful, and truthful well-wisher of your devotees? To those who worship you in sincere friendship, you reward everything they desire, even your own self, yet you never increase or diminish. Text 679. This statement of Uddhava's is found in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 2nd chapter, verse 23. Alas, how shall I take shelter of one more merciful than he? How shall I take shelter of one more merciful than he who granted the position of mother to the she-demon Putana, although she was unfaithful and she prepared deadly poison to be sucked from her breast? So this is an interesting statement by Uddhava saying, talking about how Lord Krishna felt that Putana had come to kill him by smearing her breast with poison and having him suck her breast as a baby, as an infant, like that. Even there, he granted her the position of his mother, which is an exalted position in devotional service. Text 680. According to the devotee's level of advancement, there will be appropriate prescribed duties for him to carry out. But here, we will describe the duties of a Vaishnava in general.
Om Namo